relatively early on in my life, moved around quite a lot. Throughout school, nothing really stuck. Got into a little bit of trouble here and there from just sort of overconfidence. The usual sort of bloke that ends up in the forces. As soon as my 18th birthday ticked around, went back down and had like my 19th birthday in training. At the time of training, 4-2 were serving their last Herrick. Went and did mounted training, went over to America, did Cougar, went back to 4-2. And I actually got pinged for driver. Landing craft were relatively low. He could probably get it swapped to that. Went up to 4-3 Commando after that. That was a big one for me leaving the Corps. I was going out and consulting and doing sort of hostile environment training. The fire service was, in my mind, that perfect mixture. I never had dark thoughts or depression until I was in the fire service, but it wasn't related to what I was seeing and what I was doing at the time. Started doing some messing around with some designs, selling some stickers. From that, GTC was born, and everything we do with GTC is based around those three things: hard work, integrity, and sacrifice in service.
Welcome to the debrief. This week I've got a former Royal Marine Commando and firefighter who now dabbles in a bit of this and that and the other. Right, PJ, how are you, buddy? All right?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for coming, mate. So,
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to do the same as I do with all my guests. I'm going to pick your life apart, debrief you, and see where we go from there, all right?
Yeah, sounds
And I'm
good.
going to go right to the very beginning of your life, and I'm going to find out about little PJ. So where's little PJ from? Where are you from?
So I'm from Rochford, which is in Essex, just outside of Southend.
Okay.
For my sins. So I sort of grew up there, but relatively early on in my life, moved around quite a lot.
Okay.
Ended up heading over to Wales.
What was there a reason for that?
It's mainly my parents split up, usual sort of story.
Yeah.
Relatively amicable, nothing sort of massively untoward.
What did they do? Did you stay with your mum or your dad?
I stayed with my mum.
Okay.
Yeah. Stayed relatively close to my dad.
How
most
old was that
weekends.
when that happened?
Now you're asking questions, aren't you? I must have been about 8 or 9, I think.
Okay, all right.
It was probably last couple of years of primary school.
So did your mum get another bloke? Was there a stepdad turn up? All that sort of game?
Yeah, he turned up, bloke called Steve.
Yeah.
Really good guy, salt of the earth, carpenter, been doing it all his life, still does it now.
What did your dad do?
He's a copper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he worked in the Met for 31 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, really long time. And he did quite a lot in there and sort of diverse sort of career in there.
Yeah.
And we've actually managed to work together on some consulting stuff since I've left the forces and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Which has been quite
That's
cool.
nice.
Yeah. Doing some hostile environment training, things
Cool.
like that.
Oh, mega.
So that was quite cool. But yeah, and he sort of still does that consulting side now.
Yeah.
And
What
then
sort of age is he?
he is now, he's 30 years older than me, so he's about 63, 62,
Still
63.
going, he's still doing it.
Yeah,
good
the
effort.
old ticker's still going.
Yeah. So, school, what were you like at school? You any good?
I was probably that classic story of would do better if he applied himself type guy.
Yeah.
The usual sort of bloke that ends up in the forces, to be honest. Not that book smart, but relatively switched on. If I applied myself and sort of cared more about school, I probably would have done a bit better.
I get that from a lot of people. It's just, I could never sort of like say, where's that going to fit in my life? Why do I need to know that to progress my life? I don't need to know that. Who gives a about Richard III? Like, do you know what I mean? I don't care. Do you know what I mean? How's that going to help me move forward? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And there was no like subjects or anything that really sort of interested me.
Yeah, they don't sell it to you in a very. Do you know what I mean? It's all sat there in lines doing that. Do you know what I mean? It's not for me.
Yeah. Sit
not
there.
for me, like a battery chicken, isn't it?
Yeah. Listen to one person talk about something that I don't even
You're
know
telling
about.
me. You're not asking me. You're telling me. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't. It was one of those where I didn't have a bad time at school, but it wasn't. It wasn't exciting. It didn't.
Did you do anything out of school? You were a cadet or a scout or anything like that?
Yeah, I was. So I joined relatively late. So I joined the air cadets at 15.
Okay.
And you know what it's like. You go to whatever cadets is closest. Really,
Yeah, of course you do. Yeah.
But I did have sort of aspirations to sort of go down into the RAF route, sort of very loosely, I would say.
Yeah.
I think it was only based
What put
around
you onto that? Just.
seeing an air show. Southend Air Show used to be pretty
Oh,
big.
okay, yeah, it was big, wasn't it? In the day, red arrows every year.
Exactly, yeah. And I still think today one of the best jobs in the military is, fast jet pilot, or it seems like it from the.
Do you know what? This is a really weird story, and I shouldn't be telling the story today, but I had a mate whose brother was a fast jet pilot, and he hated it.
Oh,
and
really?
He hated it because he was always on his own.
Yeah.
He was based up in the middle of nowhere on standby for half his life on a pager, on his own. In his little plane, whatever it is. And so he moved on to Hercs in the end, and he had a crew, and he went around the world and loved it. But there you go. I digress. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, no. I mean, well, that's it. You know, as a kid, when you're sitting there, you know, in your sun lounger, or my old man actually had a flat in Westcliff after they'd split.
Wow, you can see
and,
that.
he had like a rooftop.
This
flat.
is another thing that schools do to some kids as well. So when you was a really small kid, you probably wanted to be an astronaut or a pilot or a rocket. Where does that go? By the time you leave school, you're like, oh, that's been put out of reach then. Thanks for that. Do you know what I mean?
That's it. You know, maybe I would have had the potential to do it. I doubt it.
Yeah.
And most
but they don't sell it to you. They don't say that if you do that. Anyway, schools. Not for me.
Schools
Not for
schools. No, I think my passion, I enjoyed playing rugby. I did a bit of basketball. And
did you play rugby for a team, did you?
Yeah, did. Yeah, Rochford 100. Played with them ever since. I think I started in under 6, under 7s.
Wow.
And played all the way through until I left the area, sort of, I must have been 14, 15.
Okay.
And then I went to Wales. So I played there.
God, they loved you in Wales then, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was about the only thing they loved about me, is that I played rugby. The language barrier, although they spoke English, was definitely there.
Yeah, 100%.
And it was weird, like, because I got a brother and a sister, but I did have a younger brother as well.
You say you did have?
I did have, yeah. About 2 years ago, he passed.
Oh, dear. That's horrible, yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird situation, but it ended up being medical reasons that we lost him. But, you know, when it's your younger brother, it's sort of hurts a little
I'm sorry to hear that.
That's all right. He'll come back up as well, because it's part of the journey of life, really. But, yeah, when we went to Wales, we sort of all went together, and it was very much we don't want to go, we don't want to leave our friends, our little network in Essex and Southend and Rochford. And then probably about 3 years later, none of us wanted to come back. You know, we'd grown up then with new friends, new family, playing rugby, riding scramblers around the farmer's field.
It's just the unknown, isn't it? It's the unknown when you step away. And I know this, I don't know that yet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But actually, when you get to know that, it's all right, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, when did you first start getting this? When did you first start thinking about doing the forces thing as a living?
So I think the forces was always there in the background, to be honest, or some sort of services. You know, my old man, as I say, was Met. His old man was career army. My old man was actually, I'm pretty sure he was born in Germany in the military camp there, but then grew up sort of in the UK.
Yeah.
And went to sort of like a military boarding school and things like that.
Yeah.
And moved upwards. So it was always sort of in the background. Always lurking. And I think one of my earliest memories was my second cousin, I think he was a Corps Commission Marine. So he went in as a normal bloke and then Corps Commission later on. And he's one of the guys that owns one of the consulting firms that I ended up doing some work with. And he now lives out in the US. And one of my earliest memories is being at his sort of first wedding, and he was sort of dressed up to the nines with his fancy sword and his blues and twos and looking all cool. And there's a photo of me running around the gravestones. Obviously, when you're a toddlerish, you don't really know, do you? And you're just sort of like hiding, playing, laughing and joking. And in the background, you see him with all his groomsmen sort of all dressed up to the nines in their blues.
Yeah.
And it's sort of that sort of memory, I think, started the passion. And then throughout school, nothing really stuck. Wasn't really interested in anything.
Yeah.
Got into a little bit of trouble here and there from just sort of overconfidence, I'd say, more than anything. And it was
what
just
kind of trouble?
Fighting, mainly fighting.
Normal.
Yeah. You know, getting kicked out of class and stuff whenever at school just for being cheeky or answering back.
Bit of truancy now and again.
Exactly. I mean, what's the point in going to school if you're not any good at it anyway, eh?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So it was all sort of like leading to a point of like just picking something that had an outlet. It was just a little bit more physical, something to do. And actually, I wanted to join the Marines at 16. You can join at like 15 and something months.
Yeah.
But you have to have parental permission.
Yeah, that's right.
So I went to my mum and said, you know, as I say, I was living with her and we were back in sort of Southend way by then. And I said to her, I want to join the Marines. And it was sort of, when I joined the cadets, the air cadets, it was sort of just sort of military. Then I was like, well, okay, not smart enough to go into the pilot route. Okay, maybe I'll look at sort of some other route. And other things were sort of moving around, and it sort of all fell into place where Marines just sort of kept popping up. And that was sort of like the focus then. And blinkers went on probably around 15, 16, I would say. And that was it. That's all I could think about.
All we want to be as a Marine.
Yeah, and that was it. Okay. And so I went, asked the mum.
What year was this?
So I would have been going through that process 2007, 2008-ish. Okay, so
proper at war as well.
Yeah. At that time, Iraq and Afghanistan was at its height, I guess. T-tune towards the end, although no one knew it was the end.
Yeah.
And, you were seeing it on the news every day. It was sort of relatively commonplace, but there was a lot of stories coming out, especially about Marines and paras, but I would cherry pick what ones you listen to, didn't you?
Yeah, of course you do.
And, just sort of focusing on the Marines, and everything was all encompassing. It was just leading me down that road. So I went to my mum and said, can I join? And, mums being mums, she said, definitely not. No way in hell am I signing that piece of paper. And I guess, she's watching the same news I am.
Yeah, I get that. I do get that.
And I don't blame her. I was a little bit bitter at the time, but I also kind of understood it, but not enough to take that as the answer. So I then went to my dad, and they hadn't really been on speaking terms for probably best part of 10 years by then. And summary was, I would probably let you go, but if your mum says no, I'm not messing with that. I'm not gonna deal with that wrath. And essentially my mum was like, look, go and do your A-levels, see how you feel then. And then if you want to, you'll be over 18 anyway. So I stayed on at sixth form, did my A-levels in, I can't even remember what they were now. Barely paid attention, barely turned up, but got a couple of ticks in the boxes. As soon as my 18th birthday ticked around, went back down, signed on, and had like my 19th birthday in training.
Okay, so you're in training. How did you find training? Did you enjoy training?
Enjoy is a weird word.
Got to be a bit of a pest.
Yeah, or a fizz ninja. I mean, you had Ryan Forrest on, you had DC on like relatively recently.
Yeah, I've had a few.
They've all sort of been through the process, and they sort of probably said it better than I could, to be honest. There was good points to it. I was never a fizz ninja. I was never sort of Mac 10 at the front of the pack, but I found some things quite easy, weirdly enough. And I think some of that's due to, from the cadets, to be honest, things like map reading was relatively old hat.
Yeah, if you've already got those skills in the bank. Yeah. I always say if your fitness is on point, i.e. you're not worried about every time someone says outside in your PT kit. Yeah. If you're not worried about that and you've got half a brain on you, you'll be all right. Like, do you know what I mean? Because you can. Yeah. But if you've got those other skills, a bit of map reading, because it took me ages to get me around map reading. Like when I joined, and I was like, gee, I was dumber than dumb. Like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I got there eventually. Yeah. But
I mean, that's probably what it was like the first time I was sort of doing it. And the instructors down at the cadets were probably banging their head against the wall going, what is this bloke doing?
Yeah, but it's in. Once it's in, it's in.
Once it's in. Yeah. And it's one of those things where obviously you learn more advanced skills and tactics and all that, but the idea of looking at a map and seeing it be in 3D rather than just squiggles on a page and using a compass and relating.
Understanding relief and all the rest of it. Yeah.
Exactly, and GMAs and all that. It just sort of, where other people were maybe more focused on that and working a bit harder to get it right, I just had that little bit of time to either try and help them so they could help me with something or just rest my brain a little bit. And then even in the early days, things, in the Marines, I think it's changed a little bit now, but you do your first 2 weeks in foundation, which is...
I'm not sure how it works. I've been down there recently as well. It's just,
Well, they used to have this foundation block, and there was first 2 weeks, you have 60 blokes all in there, one big troop. That's who you start with. And, they go in and teach you how to shower and all that. And that's the bit where you all sleep naked that everyone speaks about when it comes to Marine training. The highlights, some might say. And, that is all about ironing. It's all about ironing and balling your boots and your shoes and making sure everything's prepped for locker inspections and all that. And again, luckily, because I'd been doing that for a few years.
Yeah, you understand how to polish a boot and all the rest of it. Yeah.
So you still have to put the time in, but it was sort of like you can work with other people.
Yeah,
you know,
and it's not a shock to the system either, is it? It's sort of like, oh my God, they're making me do that.
Exactly, and you can help get around each other. So if I'm there done and I'm prepped, I can go.
That's a massive plus for me, for even cadets now. When I speak to them, they've had that, they've got that in the bank, and there's so many people who served, so many people I've had on here who've served, who've been in the cadets in some capacity. It's incredible organisation. Really is cool.
I think it's a strange one. It really is, because it does get a bad rap. I think it got a bad rap when I started serving. I didn't overly hide it, but I also would definitely not tell people that I was a cadet.
Yeah.
Now I'm a bit older, a bit wiser, and I don't really care. It benefited me greatly, and it gave me so many wonderful experiences. I went to Cyprus, I went all over the UK, saw the red arrows on the tarmac and saw them taken off at RAF Scampton, flew Cessnas, and I was 15, 16, 17. It's like shooting 2.2 Lee Enfields and all that.
Well, the other thing you do is you'll probably have come across a couple of people in your life at that stage who were proper role models.
Oh,
and 100%. I always say my first proper role model was my section commander in depot.
Yeah.
Because he was a proper man. Do you know what I mean? School teachers, forget about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
My old man was a bully. He beat me up. So the actual first bloke that I came across was in the military.
Yeah. And you
know
still
what I mean?
think
But you'll
about
get that in the cadets, because there will be instructors who fit those criteria, isn't it? You know what I mean?
100%. I mean, the two top people when I was there, Julie Thompson and Steve Thompson, they were a husband and wife team. She was the officer commanding, he was the warrant officer of the squadron. Yeah. And they were sort of all of my generation of those cadets. I mean, also just lifelong mates. But I actually met my partner, who I've been with for 16 years through Air Cadets. All of my best mates that we still talk to now, and they're all over the world. Some are serving, some are in the police, some are in Thailand doing God knows what, and it all stems from that, So, it's a bit of a weird reputation, the cadets. I think a lot of people give it a bad rap, but mainly because they don't understand it and what it is.
Yeah, I think that's more the case. So when you passed out, you finished at depot.
Yeah.
Where did you go? What was your first posting? What commando did you go to?
So I went straight to 4-2.
Okay.
Towards the end of it, they were it was stirring and people talking, and everyone's trying to decide where to go. And all of my training at that time, everything was focused on Afghanistan. All of the section commanders and everyone had just finished tours. I believe at the time of training, 4-2 were serving their last Herrick. So it was all sort of, where do you want to go? And it was essentially focused around, well, who's going to Afghan next? And everyone in the troop was like, right, who's going to Afghan next? And I believe it was 40 were going to finish out, and I think it was 17.
Yeah.
So I put down first choice, right, I want to go to 40. Didn't get that. So they were like, right, you're going to 4-2. And I was like, okay, is what it is. The rumours at the time were that 4-2 were going to go and do a joint Herrick with 40 as like a last hurrah from the Marines. So it was sort of like, okay, might be able to get on and do something. And then, whether it's true or not, but this is the hate that we all told each other when we got to 4-2, was that the CO decided that he wanted to be the first to go back onto Cougar. Well, they called it Op Cougar, but it's essentially a big exercise. And he wanted to be the first after the Herrick tours to do that.
Yeah.
So he sort of
said,
said,
what was that?
no.
What did that entail? Where was that?
So that was actually really good. No, I sort of moaned about it that I didn't get to go and do maybe what I'd been training to do, but that was essentially sort of a 6 to 9 month, depending on which element you were part of. And it was essentially a tour around the Middle East. Show of force, training.
Yeah.
And it was
based
fantastic. Mainly, but K Company 4-2 were Fly Forward Company, which, and I believe they earned that because of how well they did on Herrick, was the rumour.
Okay.
And then I suddenly passed out. We did a couple of training exercises, did a couple of mountain, sort of mountain training, type things. Then we went to America. We did Black Alligator, which is like a beat up for it, and they still do Black Alligator today. Okay. And then we went out on this. And it was essentially, a mixture. We were on ship for a few months, then we'd fly forward, go be in country for a little bit, then we'd be on ship for a little bit more and sort of bounce around a little bit. It was really good, actually.
So
it was
did you get an Afghan in, did you?
No.
You didn't
No,
go? Okay.
no.
There
So
must
that
have
was
been a
it.
little bit of friction in the unit then from the blokes who had and the blokes that hadn't.
There, let's say some of the welcoming drinks were quite fruity. And there was a little bit of, there was never hostility, 100% no. But there was a little bit
There's
of
a dozen
squad.
then there, isn't there?
Yeah.
That's a big.
There was a bit to
Yeah.
start with. And I think early days of my career, you know, I maybe probably didn't perform as well as I could have, maybe at different points. And also maybe there was an unrealistic sort of expectation of the newer lads coming out because they hadn't had the opportunity or didn't go.
Yeah.
So I think there may have been a little bit of that friction.
Yeah.
But by the time I was sort of a year in, especially by the time I got back off Cougar, it sort of no one cared. No one,
Right, okay,
no one really
yeah.
bothered.
It does. It always peters out eventually, doesn't it? So,
yeah.
where else did you go? What else did you do while he was in the Marines?
So after 4-2, it was what they at the time they called DSS, which was like pings.
Yeah.
And it was sort of essentially once you've done 18 months to 2 years, which by the time I passed out, went and did, as I say, some mounted training, went over to America, did Cougar, went back to 4-2. I was knocking on the 2-year mark. And that was the point where there was 5 branches that no one in the Marines joins the Marines to do. It was drivers, clerks, chefs, SIGs, and there was one more. I can't remember. Stores.
Yeah, stores. All right. Yeah.
It's the stuff that makes the wheels turn, makes the cogs turn. You need it. If you're going to be an odd independent force, you're going to need to have those people filling those roles. But no one joins the Marines going, I can't wait to be a clerk.
Can't wait to be a storeman.
Exactly. And so that comes knocking, and essentially if you don't get a draft or get something to do a specialisation, after about 18 months to 2 years, they'll go, right, okay, you have to go and do one of these jobs. And it was knocking on the door, and I actually got pinged for driver. And I was sort of like, well, this isn't ideal, but part of the reason I got pinged for driver was because I'd done my driving quals, getting ready to go to Cougar.
Okay.
It was one of those classic, we're going on this exercise tour operation thing. We need X amount of drivers. Who wants to do it? Being the new guy, I was like, doesn't matter whether I want to do it or
You're going to get volunteered anyway, aren't you? Yeah,
I'm going to volunteer before I get told I'm doing it. So I had a few more licenses. So they're like, right, you're doing this. I was very lucky. My sergeant major at the time, Stubbsy, a bit of an ML legend, he managed to somehow dangle it. And I think I sort of somehow did all right on Cougar to the point where out on the trip, the Commandant General of the Royal Marines got presented a Longines watch by, I think it was one of the Omanis, may have been UAE. And because of his position in like politics, he couldn't accept gifts from foreign powers.
Yeah.
So what he did was he said, right, I'll give it to one of the lads that was out doing it. And they did sort of like a Bakshi selection process, which was like nominate a person from each troop on this particular part of the exercise, do a little sort of interview process, 1 to 2 to 3. And if you get through it, you get presented a watch. And don't know how, luck of the net, slip through the net, however you want to say it. When I got back to 4-2, I was presented the watch by the Commandant General. So I think a mixture of those sort of things allowed me to have a little bit of like Stubbsy wanted to look after me a little bit.
Yeah.
And he just said, look, if you pick something else the Corps wants, I might be able to speak to the branch sponsors and get your draft changed. I hadn't thought about it. What have you got? What do you recommend? What's going on? And he said LC branch, so landing craft, were relatively low. He could probably get it swapped to that. I'd always liked boats. I'd been...
that's quite an alley little job as well, isn't it?
It's not bad, yeah. And I was like,
better driving anyway.
100%. And that was my thoughts. Was like, right, well, I sort of thought about it anyway. Let's give that a go.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, can I have a bit of that? And he was like, go on then, give it a crack. So I went down to Plymouth, did my training down there. And again, passed out of there, finished that training. That's about 15 weeks. And probably the best part of that was they, I don't know if they still do now, but they did 3 weeks of ship to shore live fire in the Falkland Islands. So they fly you down there and you essentially spend 3 weeks getting pissed and shooting guns. So that was really good. And then went up to 4-3 Commando after that.
Okay.
So I went up to 4-3 with boat troop, and the main role was borderline mind numbing. It was escorting the subs as they come in and out from whatever the patrol they're doing at the time. And it's interesting because you work with the MDP, the Military Defence Police.
Yeah.
You work with the Navy quite a lot as well. And I think technically it's a joint-led operation, but it's sort of like Navy/military police led. So some of the dynamics quite interesting, but most of the time you're on a big, massive Navy camp, one of the biggest in the country, and you spend your whole time dodging Navy officers so you don't have to salute them, and running into sort of bushes so you don't have to stand to attention to face the flag at sundown and stuff like that. You just... So, and one of the weirdest things they love to do is salute cars. If the car's got flags and license, but you're meant to stop and like face the cars and stuff.
Yeah, that's too much for me.
It's massively.
I'm not having any of that.
On the boarding teams up there, it's quite funny. There's a like a pool post. There's always a special boat service post for like training the boarding teams. I think it's all changed because I think the boarding teams are now moved to like 4-2.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because it's always a sergeant major or a warrant officer pool lad that comes in, and that's his branch. And he's always strolling up and down the main drag with like jacket undone, no beret on. And you see sort of the jumped up new sort of Navy officers wandering down the road. Right, I'm going to get this Marine, get a bit closer, see his stable belt and go, oh, I'm going to change the side of the road and duck off into a building.
See you later.
Yeah. But no, so, it was a good time.
So you got out?
Yeah.
Why did you get out?
So a mixture of things. I think overall frustration with not being able to do my job, I think, was the biggest one.
Okay.
I joined primarily during that period of Afghanistan. My main sort of aim was I never thought it'd be a career, but I never thought it would be a flash in the pan either. It was just get the green lid, go and do the job. When that all pivoted and it was out of my control, I just sort of started going, oh, okay, well, if I can't do that, what else is there? Okay, LCs, right, whatever. But I was knocking on the doors of promotion. I was a Lance Jack looking at going up to corporal, and looking at that career path was essentially I was going to have to be on ship for 2 years. Or alternatively go down to 539, which is the assaulting squadron, and be on larger boats for at least a couple of years, the big landing craft with the big doors. And again, I just wasn't bothered by it at all.
Yeah,
you know,
flick your switch.
Not at all. I like boats, but I like the small, nippy speed boats, the boarding side of it, that sort of thing. Exactly. It's all good fun, and you can crash into things and not too bad things happen.
Yeah.
But, and essentially it all just sort of was like, right, well, that would be my career. So I actually spoke to the branch sponsor, and said, you know, would I be able to transfer out if I found something? And that was my first move, was to try and find something else within the Corps rather than leave. And essentially he was like, yeah, you know, if you find something, we can let you out. And I was like, what sort of things would let me out? And he was like, air crew, PTIs, or SF. And they were, you know, SF, they would have to let you go. I probably wouldn't have passed, but it wasn't really what I was driving for to be SF. Wasn't smart enough to be air crew. And definitely not fit enough to be PTI. So I was pretty much just like, none of them tickle my pickle, but all right, I'll call it. And I was just like, okay, I'll find another challenge outside, essentially.
Okay, so you pulled pin, pop smoke, off you went. And what did you do then?
So I bounced around a little bit. I did some quals, and some towards the end of my training, end of my time rather, I was sort of doing a lot of STTs, so short-term training teams. Yeah. Out in Cameroon with usually USMC led and things like that.
Quite decent little jobs, aren't they?
Fantastic. Yeah. I loved them. And I built up quite a decent sort of skill set for them, working through interpreters and teaching and stuff like that. So I started also, when I was coming towards the end of my service, in my sort of notice period, if you like, I was going out and consulting for my second cousin, who I mentioned earlier. And doing sort of hostile environment training out in the US and different places like that, out in the Netherlands. And that sort of like led on. So I kept doing a bit more of that, those sort of trips, and then picked up another sort of couple of providers, and I was just sort of contracting doing that.
Yeah.
Did my PT quals. Like most sort of bootnecks when they leave, they go and do PT stuff.
Yeah.
And boot camps. Started linked up with another ex-bootneck, actually. They started a company called Essex Boot Camp.
I don't know it, but yeah.
Glenn Roberts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the biggest. It's essentially, you know, like BMF type stuff, but it's
Yeah.
the biggest in Essex. And they're dominating the whole county and doing really well.
Yeah,
Glenn
nice.
Roberts and Jim Sweeney. And they gave me a shot, and I worked with them for a few years. And then the fire service opened up. And the fire service was sort of, in my mind, that perfect mixture. I was enjoying doing the physical stuff, doing the training, that sort of thing, but I was really missing the core. I was really missing the lads. I was missing the travel.
Yeah.
I was missing just being part of something a bit bigger than myself. So when it came up and it opened, Essex hadn't started recruiting or hadn't recruited for like 9 years or something.
It's funny, firefighting recruiting, and they can go ages and not have anybody, and then all of a sudden they're like, right, we need 50 bods, and it's all guns blazing, isn't it?
Exactly. And it was mental because, like, for about 9 years, they've been surviving on just like whole time to like retain to whole time. So like the part-time firefighters like training to go full-time.
Yeah.
And essentially they were just doing loads of ghost redundancies. On the back of fire trucks, it's meant to be like 6 on each wagon. Or like each truck can have 6 people. When I sort of got out of training and got there, it was 4 max every time. If you had 5, it was like a Christmas miracle, to be honest.
Yeah.
And when I sort of left, they started recruiting again. It was back up to sort of 5 and 4 most of the time, which was a bit better. But it just showed like how they just stopped recruiting. And we're like, okay, we don't need people now. And it's like, well, you do. But they just did the ghost redundancies.
How was your training for that compared with the Marines?
Yeah, it was easy. It was easy.
It's not as physically demanding, is it?
No,
all, so.
No, not at all. And I think mentally it was okay as well.
Yeah.
They stage it out quite well, and they teach the actual teaching, I think, was probably better than the Marines.
Well, you've got to take it on board, haven't you? Because there's some, you know, even from things like the fire triangle day one, I expect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're learning stuff all the time, which is going to be effectively impacting potentially anyone's life any day after that.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the big things that attracted me to it, was like whatever training you did there, you were gonna
it's real time.
Definitely do it.
It's real time. You are going to do that. Yeah. No, you're right. So you finished your training there. Did you go to a watch, or is it called a watch?
It is. Yeah. So I went to Green Watch in Harlow in Essex, and that's where I stayed throughout my career.
How long did you do with them?
Must have been about 4 years in the end. I only actually left technically October just gone.
Oh, okay. So have you got any shouts that come to mind? Your first shout. What was your first shout?
Couldn't tell you.
No.
Literally couldn't tell you. There was parts of the job where I think because of the time in the Marines, and, you know, especially on that Cougar and things like that, as Fly Forward Company, we had some great jobs. You know, we were fast roping out helicopters onto the beach.
Yeah.
Doing live kill houses, you know, it was just brilliant. And then we were on the way to shouts in the middle of the night, and the blues and twos were firing down the motorway, and I was falling asleep in the back of the motor. I just wasn't jacked up for it at all.
Save someone's toaster.
Exactly, and that's what it really felt like. So, no, I can't tell you what the first one was. There was a few nasty ones, yeah.
Tell us about a nasty one.
Tell you about a nasty one. So I think car fire is always bad.
Oof, horrendous, yeah.
You know, occupied or not occupied, you just don't know until you get there. That's always bad. And then the worst ones, really, the most gruesome ones are obviously the RTCs, the road traffic collisions, especially if there's motorbikes involved. I don't really need to go into details. I think most people can understand or sort of recognise them. I think I was lucky where none of them really seemed to really massively affect me either way. I was there to do a job. I did my job to the best of my ability, and I went home. You know, I never really got too caught up into it emotionally. I think I had my own mental challenges for completely different reasons.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways, and probably still today, I'm pretty bad mentally in terms of I don't process it in maybe a normal way. And it was very much on and off for me, on and off switch, not bothered, go in, do the job, and I can very easily switch and just not get excited by it at all. Blessing or curse, that's the way it was. And I think the biggest thing that I struggled with, rather than seeing things and dealing with incidents in front of me, was more sort of mental struggles like loneliness. That was a big one for me leaving the Corps. And I think that's what drew me back to a club, if you like the fire service, is to be around people all the time. But I think even then, I never really managed to get emotionally caught up in things. And it wasn't until... So essentially that's all the fluffy part. And then I would go down a path where, in my early days, especially when I first passed out of the Marines, I'd be very hot-headed, aggressive, still like I was a kid, but this time with newfound confidence of Marine training.
Yeah.
Get into a bit of trouble, fights on the street, that sort of stuff. And it sort of all started developing into sort of, as I went through my career, being very deadpan and relatively emotionless with everything. Got to the point where, and that sort of question for you about the watch is really sort of like, about the incident sort of brings this one up perfectly, was I never had dark thoughts or depression until I was in the fire service, but it wasn't related to what I was seeing and what I was doing at the time.
It was related to what you were missing out on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or where you would sooner have been.
Yeah. And there was a lot of, I guess, guilt as well, in terms of all of my training, all of my focus, and why I joined the Corps was to go out and serve in Afghanistan and do that thing.
I call it PTSD in reverse. It's a craving for something you didn't get.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like, you see it in quite a few veterans that perhaps only did a couple of tours or not even a tour of Northern Ireland, then got out, then it all booted off like Chinese New Year. They didn't go.
Yeah.
They felt like they should have gone, and that gives them depression.
Yeah.
And that gives them mental health, because they're like, well, there's nothing I can do about it because I can't join up again, but I've actually missed out. And it's PTSD in reverse. It's not because of what you've seen, it's because of what you haven't seen. Yeah,
it's almost like a massive sort of FOMO, fear of missing out. And it was, I'm nowhere near naive enough to ever say I'd wish I'd gone to Afghanistan, because I get that.
Yeah. I say to young lads now, it's a cliched thing, don't be careful what you wish for, lads. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But actually, if you don't get that, it's like you're the butcher that never managed to cut a pig open.
100%.
You know what I mean? It's like, well, I never actually did that.
One of the blokes, there's quite a famous quote, and I think he was a bootneck, and like Sky News or Sky Radio or someone came in and sort of were chatting to him a couple of days into his tour in Afghan. And he was sort of quoted as saying something along the lines of like, oh, how do you feel about being here and doing this job? And he replied, well, it's kind of like being a Premiership football player and never playing a game, always being on the bench, always training. Now I'm in the game. And essentially that's really sort of good analogy. How I felt was that I never got to play a game. So it was that weird sort of missing out on what I'd trained for and what I'd sort of built myself up to. And then leaving the lads and that sort of thing. And luckily nothing's kicked off to that extent now anyway. But you didn't know that at the time. You never knew it would.
You still feel like you've missed out, don't you?
Yeah. You know, if I wanted it that bad, I could have made it happen. You know, SF were always rotating. Yeah. There was plenty of opportunities for me to go and do one of the supporting roles for SF.
Did you do any of the civvy circuit stuff? Did you go anywhere with that?
No, not
so
really.
So I got out quite early, but I went to Afghanistan. I went to Syria. I've done all these places as a civvy. Like, you know what I mean, so all right, it wasn't the same as what I would have done if I was in the regiment, but it fed me to a scratch. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. Do you know what I mean?
No, I didn't. Like I've been lucky enough to go to some pretty sketchy places. Like I was in Ukraine before the war kicked off.
Yeah.
But always relatively safe. You know, in nice cushy jobs, nice hotels, drinking in the bars, teaching all day, having great time, shooting on the range type thing. So very lucky in that sense. So I never scratched that itch, but I had I was never I had dark thoughts and things, but I was just sort of always very neutral. Yeah. Very neutral about everything. To the point where my missus went, you need to go speak to someone. This ain't right. You know, you can't be this sort of neutral about really sad things or really happy things happening. It just, nothing affected me. Took me a while to get convinced to go speak to someone. And I actually finally built up the courage. So I called an NHS helpline. Worst thing ever done. I took me hours to speak to someone. Spoke to someone. They were like, yeah, we recommend you speak to, essentially it was a triage nurse. We recommend you speak to a specialist. So I spoke to the specialist. He was like, yeah, we recommend treatment, as in like a counselling treatment. You need to wait X amount of weeks, then call this number. So wait X amount of weeks, call this number. Each time it's a build up to try and get yourself to call these people and, you know, talk about your issues again, especially for someone that feels essentially deadpan emotionally. It was sort of always a bit of a build up to try and do it. And managed to speak to someone, and essentially they said, because you're on a rotating shift pattern with the fire service and you can't commit to one session a week or one every 2 weeks, we can't schedule you in. And I was like, I literally don't understand what you want from me here.
Yeah, especially after sort of like building yourself up to doing something, which is quite a difficult thing to do, and then you're getting the fingers thrown up at you effectively, aren't you?
Exactly.
See you later, off you go. Do you know what I mean?
100%. So essentially, I wrapped on that, and I actually saw Rock to Recovery. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, great organisation. Yeah,
incredible.
I retweet their stuff and all that sort of stuff all the time. And
so I heard about them through Essex Boot Camp and through Glyn Roberts. And I went down, booked in a session with them, and literally I think I had 2 sessions with one of their counsellors. And at the time, I thought it was it's a weird process. You do some exercises, you do some weird stuff with them, talk about some stuff, and they run you through some coaching. And for weeks afterwards, I was like, that was weird gobbledygook. No idea what they went on about. Didn't help, just mental. And then it was only about 3 months later that I went, oh my God, like I'm fine. I'm 100% fine. I'm happy.
Yeah.
I don't have anything dark to think about. And I'm actually being able to, I'm still relatively sort of neutral, but like happiness was happiness and sadness was sadness again, you know, and it was just all fine, really. And sort of, that was sort of the fire service part of it, to be honest.
So now, just have a quick chat about what you're doing now. This is your chance to plug yourself now.
Yeah, I know. This the fun bit, isn't it? So it's a really weird thing. So essentially what I do now is I'm full-time with a company or a brand that I started called Gibraltar Trading Company. Yeah. And it's essentially just it's a clothing brand. You know, there's loads of them now, veteran-owned, service-owned clothing brands. An apparel type thing, exactly. Yeah. And we're best known for our sort of silky shorts, you know, like Ranger panties, short shorts type things. They're, you know, essentially bootneck attire on ship. You know, the shorter your shorts, the more manly you are. You know, it's a well-known fact that if you walk along the beach, no one cares how much you can bench press, but they will ask how much you can squat. So short shorts is like a big part of it. Flannel shirts being another one. And we've just sort of expanded from there, you know, and it was really strange. So it all stemmed from, I had to go have an operation on my ankle from just repetitive injury during the Marines. Yeah. Had to get it all drilled out. And I was in the fire service at the time. I was going to be off for about 6 to 9 months. And my missus went, find a hobby. Otherwise, I'm going to ditch you. So I started doing some messing around with some designs, selling some stickers. And literally from that, GTC was born. And it just grew organically based off that. And as I brought out new things, or as I was speaking to people in this growing community that we had at the time and that we've built up to now, it just sort of, it ran away with itself, and it is what it is now, you know, and it's very strange what it is now, because I don't see it as my brand anymore, you know, and when I started it on purpose without putting my face on anything.
Yeah, I think that's quite a wise move. It's quite a wise move, you know.
It was a mixture of reasons. One, I hate social media, personally. Love it for a business tool and love it to reach out to the community and stuff. Yeah. But I didn't have a personal social media and I didn't really want one. So it was that side of it. I was still in the fire service and I still did going away doing some hostile environment, anti-poaching type stuff. So I didn't want to mix any of that stuff and have too much of a profile if I could help it. Yeah. So a lot of the early days, if you scroll right back on some of our content, it's me with my face blurred out and things like that. not so much anymore because we use sort of paid models and stuff, and it's a bit more professional and looks a bit better. But it was a bit of a thing when GTC started, was very much like we blurred all the faces out, and it was really about making Gibraltar Trading Company stand on its own 2 feet. Everything about the brand has meaning. It's all for something, even the name. You know, Gibraltar Trading Company is a throwback to 2 things. Gibraltar was a reference to the Marines.
Obviously, the Marines, yeah, get that.
And then Trading Company is a reference to what I like to call the Industrial War Revolution, which made Great Britain great.
Yeah.
You know, the East India Trading Company, for all their faults, they're the ones that really pioneered through that sort of era of how great Britain is. And they're arguably the reason why we're half the world speak English.
Yeah.
And, you know, pound is still so strong. And the other half of the country have the Great British flag, like sort of as their flag. And it was a nod to that. And then even the symbol with the circle one with the it's cross fire axes and dagger.
Yeah. Which is obviously a nod to yourself.
A nod to the fire service and to the dagger again.
Yeah. But your own achievements within those organisations.
Exactly, yeah. And then round the rim of that challenge coin you're holding there is our ethos as well. So if you put it on its side.
Okay, got you.
And that's hard work, integrity and sacrifice in service.
Yeah.
And that's, again, all of these things just sort of organically built over the 4 years that we've been doing it.
Yeah.
And that's, again, a bit of a nod to like the Commando ethos, but with our twist on it. And everything we do with GTC is based around those 3 things. It's based around hard work, integrity and sacrifice in service. And the first 2 are pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But what it means is we like to think we've got decent level of quality, decent pricing, and it's just good gear with customer service you would expect from, if you want good stuff. And then integrity, hard work, that all encompasses that. The sacrifice in service is the one that some people get a bit confused with because they're like, well, I've never served, so is GTC just for people that serve? And that's why we made the symbols the way they are, and why the Stay Wavy symbol with the shaka has no other, with the bone hand shaka, has no other sort of military aspect to it at all.
Yeah.
And it's because it's not just for the military, it's not just for services, it's for anyone that's willing to live by those sort of 3 things.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, there's so many salt with the earth people, plumbers, builders, nurses, the list goes on. That without them, the world wouldn't go round.
Everyday people that do, that's contributions are, supporting everybody.
Yeah. And their sacrifice in service isn't necessarily to the crown or to the public. It's to themselves, to better themselves. It's to their family.
But they're good, honest, hard-working people. And
they're putting the graft in. And that's what it's about, really. And that's why a lot of the designs we do and stuff, there's hundreds of clothing companies out there at the moment, veteran-owned ones.
Yeah.
Some fantastic, doing incredibly well. Others trying to break into the scene, and everywhere in between. What a lot of them have in common is they're all overtly military, and that's not a bad thing. I have a lot of them, and I wear a lot of them, and I represent a lot of them, and I like it. But it's not always what I want. Sometimes, a lot of the time in my branding, I like to be a lot more subtle, and I don't really wear a lot of flashy symbols and a lot of big stuff. And especially if you are out working somewhere that's semi-non-passive, i.e. just not, you don't want to draw attention to the fact that you're military or prior military or whatever. Sometimes it's nice to have something that's good quality gear, you're representing a brand, it's helping a small business, and it's sort of part of that ethos, but it's not overtly military.
Yeah.
And that's why all of our pieces are relatively simple. The branding is the branding, but we do a lot of camo, but it's not overly sort of like massive backprints and things like that. So, it's a weird one, GTC. It really is.
So plans for the future then?
So plans for the future, the big one is a premises, a community sort of hub location, much like what Ben's doing with HR4K.
What I was going to say, HR4K. Yeah.
Big inspiration.
Yeah.
He's smashing it. And if you're down in that Hereford area, it's perfect. They've got the ground hammer jiu-jitsu down there as well now. And it really is a central hub to bring people that are in that mindset together.
Going there, he's got this going there, that going there. Yeah, great.
And they do like the sort of open sort of fairs where they invite like different brands down as well, and it's amazing. And Through Dark have a bit of facility, and they sort of do a little bit like that as
Through
well.
Dark's place, yeah.
Yeah, again, incredible.
Really nice to see them smashing it down there, aren't they?
Absolutely,
really? Do you know what I mean?
out
great.
of the park.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a few of them cropping up now, but I think we need more. And we would like to have one of them. That's our sort of
goal. The bigger picture is to get there. Well, I seriously hope you do. It's a cool brand. It's well thought out. It's you're doing your bits and pieces, aren't you?
And it's all built off short shorts, which is mental. But people love the pesties.
Shorts.
People love the pesties.
Short shorts.
Exactly. And that's it. It is a bit of tongue in cheek as well. There's a lot of seriousness behind it. There's a lot of meaning behind it. But at the end of the day, we also understand ourselves. We are just an apparel company. We're not here to change the world. We like to do our bit. We'll give back to charity. We like to support charity events, especially mental health charities and stuff. My own struggles and people.
It's about supporting the community, and it's what Force Radio are trying to do: is build a community, sustain a community, and share the love throughout that community. Do you know what I mean?
That's it. And there's a lot of people in this business in terms of like veteran-owned stuff, and 99% of them, they all believe in the higher tides raise all ships.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to help each other out. There's plenty of space for everyone. One of the things that we always get, like people always say to me, or especially in the early days of GTC, was like, oh, don't you think the market's flooded? Why are you trying to do that? Everyone does it. There's no space for anything. And obviously, it's busy. It is busy. But if you bring something else to the table and it's positive, there's space for everyone.
Yeah, of course there is.
Like, there's so much more here that everyone can be doing.
Yeah.
And you'll get more by working with other brands and speaking to other brands and just learn stuff.
You got to embrace everybody.
100%.
Listen, it's been great having you on.
Yeah.
We'll promote you. We'll shovel your stuff in the links below and all that. All the rest of the
Appreciate that very much.
And listen, thanks for
having me.
Yeah,
appreciate your time.
All right,
thanks, mate.